The Wild Thornberrys was a jungle adventure show about a little girl named Eliza who had the ability to speak to animals.
I bet I have a larva by the time it gets dark.
One larva?
The show's fun, good values, and positive messages about the environment made for a feel-good story for kids. With that said, the internet, as usual, has provided us with several rather dark, twisted theories about the show and characters. Theories that just may ruin your childhood. I know, we're sorry, but hey! You clicked on the video, you knew what you were in for.
I like this pesky girl.
I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and these are smashingly dark theories about the Wild Thornberrys.
It's absolutely smashing to find you at home. This is good.
What happens when predators eat their prey? Considering the Thornberrys document wildlife, they more than likely come across many incidents of animals killing each other or hunting their prey. However, what exactly happens when they actually show animal killings?
Bite your necks.
Even some of the less violent killings as well. Consider what it's like for Eliza to see a baby sea turtle getting picked off by birds and crabs, or a gazelle getting ripped apart by a cheetah and eaten alive, or a fox finding a tasty nest full of baby birds. Does Eliza hear the dying screams and cries of those baby animals?
My mom was gone! I know, but we're going to find her for you.
Eliza and her family have most certainly seen their fair share of lions or cheetahs attacking zebras or antelopes. Considering Eliza loves animals, one can only imagine the trauma involved with watching how brutal nature is.
Not soon enough! Look! Crocodiles!
Reflecting on the routine, horrifying screams of death must haunt Eliza every night. And for that matter, mating season from the perspective of Eliza. Okay, so this is probably the crudest theory yet, but you can't help but wonder, does Eliza hear animals having sex?
Then they can have babies and the species won't die out.
Now, sex is definitely not something that Nickelodeon would show, but considering the rules of the Wild Thornberrys universe, we're just following the show's logic. Imagine, if you dare, Eliza going through the jungle and hearing constant bumping and grinding. Eliza wouldn't be able to tell if the mating is being done by humans or animals, and that's pretty creepy.
I was starting to think I'd never lay any eggs.
Think about how often you hear birds chirping. Birds do this to attract mates. They're essentially trying to call for a booty call. Is that what Eliza has to listen to whenever she's outside and the birds are chirping? Honestly, the less said about that theory, the better. We're not sure which is more traumatic for Eliza, listening to the constant mating of animals in the wild or the screams of death. Either way, this is all pretty dark. Debbie is suffering from social isolation. Debbie is the older sister of Eliza and is the only other human that knows about Eliza's power to communicate with animals.
Did you say something?
Although Debbie has been able to keep such a huge secret from their parents, her and Eliza aren't exactly close.
You really are twisted, you know that?
In fact, Debbie keeps to herself, isolated from almost everyone. And the unfortunate truth is, this is probably why she has an attitude throughout most of the series. According to this theory on tvtropes.org, this is also why she spends most of her time on her laptop, while the rest of the family goes on jungle adventures.
Your virtual boyfriend dumped you?
Debbie gets most of her social interactions through online chats and email. Remember, this is the 90s, so Facebook and Twitter aren't a thing yet, nor is YouTube. So she can't subscribe to awesome YouTube channels. Ahem. Ahem. Oh man, something in my throat. She often avoids adventures as much as she can. When thinking about Debbie's past, her isolation starts to make sense.
Okay, just say it. You all think the biggest problem in this family is me.
Debbie probably grew up on the move with her family for years throughout her childhood. She probably even went through puberty in the space of that RV. Just imagine going through that with no personal space at all, and never being able to make any lasting relationships since your parents are traveling all the time. Even despite having a sibling, Eliza's always out having adventures herself, and on top of that, she's younger than Debbie, so they can't relate as much as they could if they were the same age.
I'm sorry. Did you want to play cards or show off your picture? Then find someone who cares.
Debbie's social isolation is also why she tends to fall for the first young man they encounter throughout their travels. In many ways, her parents are depriving her of so many important elements of growing up, and her antisocial behavior is a product of what is essentially negligence. Eliza is suffering from schizophrenia.
Everything's fine. Come on, I'll prove it to you.
According to this theory, Eliza's schizophrenia stems from moving around a lot and the lack of human friendship she has. Much like Debbie, the life of traveling the world and witnessing wildlife, while fun, has had some serious mental ramifications for their children.
What is wrong with you?
Apparently, Eliza's parents often ignore or dismiss her anytime she talks to animals and dismisses them as delusions. This would be a fine theory in isolation if it weren't for the Wild Thornberrys movie released in 2002, which establishes Eliza's powers as magic and the importance of why she needs to keep that power a secret.
You had to keep it a secret, or else there'd be some tornado thing and you would lose your powers.
Also, even despite mainly talking and associating with animals, Eliza is shown to be fully capable of making brief human friends as well. Still, it does make you wonder how people perceive Eliza and her abilities around her. And what if the whole magical powers plot was made up in her head, and she spends her time talking to a monkey that can't understand her?
Just forget about it, okay? Can you do that?
No.
The Wild Thornberrys were all on drugs. Normally, it's pretty easy to just explain weird things in cartoons with drugs, but this theory actually breaks down in terms of which Thornberry's taking which drug and who is addicted to what.
What rock?
The theory proposes that the shaman that put the spell on Eliza in the movie was actually a drug dealer that hooked Eliza up with acid. Nigel Thornberry, the father, is on coke, which is why he always has high energy. Debbie smokes pot, which is why she's lazy, eats a lot, and kind of just keeps to herself.
This for that?
Mary Ann, the mother of the family, is suffering from a mood disorder due to her husband's wild behavior. And because of this, she's unable to connect with her children.
Cut. Let's try it again.
Donny, the jabbering feral child that the Wild Thornberrys adopted, has also lost any and all humanity. And the Wild Thornberrys are too drugged out of their minds to properly help him. Admittedly, some of these connections to drug and mental abuse are a bit of a stretch, but I think when you really look at the behavior of these characters, there's definitely something going on.
Just stay on your side of the sheet.
The parents are very neglectful, Debbie's moody, Eliza's talking to animals. What do you think? What drugs are they taking? Eliza's lucky call in the movie. Eliza Thornberry is extremely lucky that the poachers from the 2002 movie kept their word about letting Debbie go after she had revealed to them how Eliza knew about their plans. Essentially, Eliza had foiled these animals' poachers' plans through her communication with animals, and the animal hunters had caught on to this.
You know too much for a little girl.
So, the poachers had staged sort of an ultimatum for Eliza and her sister. What ends up happening is that Eliza tells the poachers her secret.
I know these things because I can talk to animals.
Debbie is saved, but Eliza's powers are taken away, at least for that moment. Although she ends up getting her powers back, this scene could have gone a number of dark ways. For one, Eliza could have let the poachers kill Debbie, and she could have kept her powers. However, this would have left Eliza with a tremendous amount of guilt over losing her sister, just to protect her secret powers.
You will regret this.
I don't care! What you're doing is awful!
The other way the scenario could have ended is with Eliza saving Debbie, but never getting her powers back. This would leave Debbie depressed over giving away her sister's powers and probably the one thing that brought joy to Eliza's life and making her even more isolated from people. Donny has similar powers to Eliza. As previously mentioned, Donny is the wild feral child that only speaks in gibberish. However, this theory lands on the idea that Donny is smarter than the viewers have been led to believe. This theory implies that Donny has the same powers of communicating with animals that Eliza has. Although it's not very dark, it is quite mysterious. It would only make sense since Donny often talks to Darwin, Eliza's pet monkey, and Donny is also aware of Eliza's powers, and they haven't been taken away from her by the shaman. So based on the rule of keeping her powers a secret alone, it's heavily implied that Donny might be able to communicate with animals as well. It would be an ability that would make sense for him, being that he was raised by an orangutan. These were some pretty dark and wild theories. But what do you think? Were these theories valid or a little too hard to believe? Let us know in the comments section below.
Hey, I'm a Finch, and these are my associates Finch, and Finch.
Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. But most importantly, stay wicked.